Good morning. I'll ask the Honorable Deputy Governor to grace us with prayers today.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Good morning. Let us pray. Almighty God, from whom all wisdom and power are derived, we beseech thee so direct and prosper the deliberations of the Legislative Assembly now assembled, that all things may be ordered upon the best and surest foundations for the glory of thy name and for the safety, honor, and welfare of the people of these islands. Bless our sovereign lady, Queen Elizabeth II, Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, Charles, Prince of Wales, and all the royal family. Give grace to all who exercise authority in our Commonwealth, that peace and happiness, truth and justice, religion and piety may be established among us. Especially we pray for the Governor of our islands, the Premier, the Speaker of the Legislative Assembly, Ministers of Cabinet, ex officio members, and members of the Legislative Assembly, that we may be enabled faithfully to perform the responsible duties of our high office. All this we ask for thy great name's sake. Let us say the Lord's Prayer together. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thy name, the power and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. The Lord bless us and keep us. The Lord make his face shine upon us and be gracious unto us. The Lord lift up the light of his countenance upon us and give us peace now and always. Amen.
Please be seated.
Reading by the Honorable Speaker, messages and announcements.
I would wish to give condolences to the member from Easton for the loss of his mother-in-law, and I would recognize the Honorable Premier.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I too, on behalf of the members of the government, and I believe I can speak for the entire membership of the House, wish to publicly offer condolences to the member from East End and his dear wife, Alison, on the loss of her mother and his mother-in-law recently. Madam Speaker, this has really been a very difficult time for the Cayman Islands, and particularly the District of Georgetown. We have lost so many loved ones over the course of the last few weeks. And all of us, I know, have been attending many, many funerals. So on behalf of the membership of this House, and in particular the members from the District of Georgetown, I publicly offer condolences to the many families who have suffered loss of loved ones over the course of the last few weeks.
I recognize the Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
Madam Speaker, I think I have a very solemn duty, and it is much longer than a few words, because there are a few people that we have been very involved with over the years that have passed on, and I want to pay due deference through this legislature, and I do so, Madam Speaker, as the father of this Honorable Legislative Assembly. And I had planned to do it later and asked that that would not be recorded against any time that I may have, if I so choose to rise. But having gone this course, I ask the indulgence of the chair and of members, Madam Speaker.
That would be in order. Please proceed, Leader of Opposition.
Madam Speaker, I, as I said, have a very solemn duty today, and I do so as a father of this honorable House, and that is to pay tribute to great Caymanians who have gone on to their eternal reward in the past several weeks. And I join with the Premier in doing so. Madam Speaker, Cayman has lost outstanding citizens who have made vast and long-lasting contribution to the development of our islands. Firstly, I want to pay tribute to a personal friend, confidant, and a great Caymanian, the late Dr. Adlin Marin, OBE, JP. I was not able, Madam Speaker, to be at the funeral service, and so I'm going to put on record, I think what is a very great tribute paid by my cousin, Mr. Garfield Powery, JP, himself a longtime friend and colleague in the Gideon movement of Dr. Adlin, Mrs. Marin, and their family. Madam Speaker, and I quote Mr. Garfield Powery, in every country, in every land, rich or poor, small or great, there always arise a handful of special sons and daughters, born of the soil, who had an extra dimension of talent, character, and abilities. It was those individuals who became the principal contributors of the life and character of the nation. Today we mourn the passing of one of those special sons of the soil, Dr. Thomas Henry Adlin Marin. Ralph Waldo Emerson, that great American writer and philosopher, expressed it so well when he wrote, "The true test of civilization is not the census, nor the size of the cities, nor its crops, but the kind of men the country turns out." How fitting are those words to the life of this remarkable man who rendered a great contribution to this country and its people. A man who had the rare privilege of it being said of him that he had no enemies, for everyone was his friend. I am glad that I enjoyed a close friendship with him for over 40 years, which resulted in a close mutual love and respect for each other. Dr. Marin was truly a wonderful man who had some of the finest qualities of the human spirit, qualities of love for family, love for country, but most of all, he had a deep, abiding love for God and his work. He had great regard for human friendship and certainly a great love for his family, and I applaud them today for the great love and great care they afforded him throughout his illness, which is a testimony to the noble family he created. For indeed it can be said of him that his life and character speak well for itself. To paraphrase the words of Shakespeare in his famous play Julius Caesar, he wrote, his life, and I quote, his life was so peaceful and gentle, and the elements for good so mixed in him, that even nature would stand up and say that this was a special man, end of quote. For the essence of his life was to care. The beauty of his life was to love, and the joy of his life was to give. Such a man was Dr. Adlin Marin. I am glad to have known him. I am glad that he was my friend, and I will always cherish the memory of his friendship and the great privileges that I had to sit at his feet and bear all of the wonderful stories, or hear all of the wonderful stories of his noble life, which was reflective of his love for family, his love for country, but most of all, his love for the wonderful God that he served. Today, we can all say that the earth is a much better place because he graced it with his presence, and that heaven and all its richest blessing is the beneficiary of our loss. End of quote. That was a tribute which was in a program paid by my cousin, Mr. Garfield Powery. Madam Speaker, what I can also say is that Dr. Adlin was an ardent supporter of the United Democratic Party. He didn't get on the public platform, but he was our honorary chairman. And his advice over the years was invaluable to me as its leader, and to me from the early stages being elected to this House. He took a great interest in matters political, as he was a true Christian. And he assisted, Madam Speaker, the backbench in the 1989 to 92 Assembly in the formation of our parliamentary prayer breakfast, which I think elevated itself to more of a national prayer breakfast. And so, Madam Speaker, our condolences are passed on to his widow, Ms. Helen, and his children. May his soul rest in peace. In the same vein, Madam Speaker, I want to single out 4 other great Caymanian men who in their own right made huge contributions to the business world of Cayman, education, and our social development. We all know, Madam Speaker, that Mr. Thomas Hurlston, MBE, JP, Mr. Carl Godet, Cert On, and Mr. James Bodden, son of boy, MBE, JP, and Madam Speaker, Mr. George passed away. Perry George passed away recently. And it's fitting, Madam Speaker, that I do the same. Madam Speaker, Mr. Tommy made his contribution in many ways. As a seaman, then in the work of the Texaco Oil Company, and Madam Speaker, his belief and hard work in the Lions Club, where he was, I think, if I remember correctly, the founding president, Lions Club of Grand Cayman. I believe he was most instrumental in the development of the present buildings on that compound. I know he was, in his day, a backbone in the Lions Club. And through his effort, much and very meaningful work was done to enhance the lives of people through the programs of the Lions. As a justice, Madam Speaker, he gave service in the juvenile court and was always compassionate, but as we know, Mr. Tommy, he was very firm. He was also a special constable and played an important role in the development of that body, I understand. We say thanks and offer our condolences to his good wife and his brothers and sisters and other family members. May his soul rest in peace. Madam Speaker, my good friend, Mr. Carl Godet, has passed on. Carl Godet arrived in these islands in the 60s from the Turks and Caicos Islands after being trained in Jamaica by International Air Radio as a radio operator and air traffic controller. His responsibilities included the dissemination of the local weather conditions for airlines that operated in and overhead of these islands. As air traffic controller, he advised incoming and outgoing airlines of the weather conditions and of other air traffic in the area. In those days, Mr. Carl and others volunteered as firemen, saw to it that flare pots, that is kerosene burning torches, were placed alongside of the runway to light the landing path for flights, were kept serviceable, and the runway was safe. Those were the heydays of smothering mosquitoes and suffocating smoke fogging machines. That was the only method of mosquito control. He was a very dedicated and efficient person, well liked and respected by all. Carl was a very joyful gentleman with a very serious and contagious laugh. I was fortunate to have him as a loyal and genuine friend. And so, Madam Speaker, one of my first remembrances of Carl as a little boy, I saw him play football. He was an avid football player, he could kick the ball from one end of the West Bay Town Hall field, from one goal post nearly to the other one. And he, like many others who came and made Cayman their home, contributed to sports long after he left the game. But in his day, he played against the teams, the visiting teams, such as the British warships, the sailors that came. So as I said, I was fortunate to have him as a loyal and genuine friend. And so we pass on our condolences to his widow, Maggie, and his children and other family members. May his soul rest in peace, and God's light perpetual shine upon him. Madam Speaker, Mr. James Sonnyboy Borden, MBE, JP, was a good man, a very grand Caymanian, and an astute businessman. He gave exemplary service to his island home, these islands. He served with me on the Port Authority Board for 2 terms. Those years were important in the life of the port. We had hurricane damage here in Cayman and in Cayman Brac, and we had to rebuild. We recognized the need for changes to the port's operations between the cargo and cruise operation. And so between 2000 and 2005, we changed the cargo operation from day to night in order to enhance and give safety to our cruise visitors. In all that, Mr. Sonny would, in a very quiet but sensible manner, make his valid contribution. We built the present cruise facility, which made our cruise tourism viable and give it ability to grow. His was a very meaningful contribution in those hectic days. At the same time, I was Minister of Sport. There was not a time, Madam Speaker, that we went to Mr. Sonny and his good wife, Ms. Rose, that couple didn't make their donation in various ways. And so certainly we, in paying this tribute, want to express our deepest sympathy to his widow, Ms. Rose, and their family in their hour of grief. Madam Speaker, the late Perry Matthew George was a gentleman and a scholar, an economist, IT specialist, and educator. He joined the UCCI, then the Community College of the Cayman Islands, in 1996 as senior lecturer and the head of the computing department, where he provided strategic leadership in curriculum development and implementation and IT development. In 2000, he was promoted to associate professor and head of arts and sciences, where he was involved in the development of several associate and certificate programs, as well as the establishment of a student counseling department. He became the chair of the Council of Chairs in 2009 before being appointed Dean of Administration in 2011. Both leadership roles gave Mr. George responsibility for UCCI operations, policymaking, and implementation. He served on various committees at UCCI, including secretary to the Academic and Administrative Committee and co-chair of the Graduation Committee. He also took on an active role in the planning of UCCI's 10th Charter Anniversary celebration. He was, as I said, a remarkable man. He was a gentleman and a scholar. He was hardworking, dedicated, humble individual who was loved and respected in the community. He was always willing to assist in whatever way he could, no matter how small the task. He carried himself with dignity. He was always working on projects. Madam Speaker, Mr. George, like Mr. Gadet, didn't born in these islands, but like so many others who came and made Cayman their home, contributed in no small and insignificant way, but in tremendous ways, more than we can really give thanks for. For people like Mr. Perry, who was a great cricketer. I always saw him at those matches when he played for the Blue Marlins cricket team. He was inspirational to me and reliable for advice when I was Minister of Sport. I could talk to him. He would give you advice, and I found that he was reserved, but, Madam Speaker, his advice was genuine. It was solid. These are the kind of people who have made Cayman Islands what it is. And we, as Caymanians, must never forget the kind of people that come here and develop and help us develop and make this their home. And so, Madam Speaker, yes, we want to pass on our condolences to his wife and his family and their great loss, and to the fraternity at UCCI for the loss that they are experiencing with his death and passing. Madam Speaker, these are persons, outstanding citizens, who have left great examples of love, of family, love of country, who selflessly gave their time and years to their country. May their souls rest in peace. Of course, Madam Speaker, other families have been stricken with grief recently. Those who lost loved ones, we can and would like to also offer our deepest condolences. In particular, I join minds with the Premier in extending condolences to the elected member from East End, in particular, his good wife, who I count as a very good friend of mine. In losing her mother, Madam Speaker, we know what that means. When we lose our mother, we lose our best defender, our confidant. That's what we lose. People who stand by us and behind us and push us to do our best. And we want to assure Alison and her husband, the member from East End, that our thoughts are with them. And I thank you for your indulgence and that of the House.
Before we move on, does any other member wish to express any sentiments? If not, Madam Clerk, we'll move to the next item of business.
Presentation of papers and of reports. Government of the Cayman Islands, Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, financial statements for the year ended 30th of June 2014, to be laid on the table by the Honorable Attorney General, ex officio member responsible for the portfolio of legal affairs.
I recognize the Honorable Attorney General.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I beg the leave of this House to lay on the table the financial statements for the period ended 30th of June 2014 for the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions.
So ordered. Does the Honorable Attorney General wish to speak to the report?
Madam Speaker, no. The report itself is quite self-explanatory. Thank you.
Report of the Standing Business Committee, 5th meeting of the 2014-15 session of the Legislative Assembly, to be laid on the table by the Premier, the Honourable Minister of Home Affairs, Health and Culture, Chairman of the Standing Business Committee.
I recognize the Honorable Premier.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I beg to lay on the table of this Honourable House the report of the Standing Business Committee with respect to the 5th meeting of the 2014-2015 session of the Legislative Assembly.
So ordered. Does the Honorable Premier wish to speak to the report?
No, thank you, Madam Speaker.
Statements by the honourable members and ministers of the Cabinet.
There are no statements for this morning.
Government business bills. Second reading. The appropriation July 2015 to June 2016 Bill 2015.
Moving on with the second reading. Does any other member wish to speak? I recognize the Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, before beginning my budget presentation, I do want to extend my congratulations to the Tories or the Conservatives on becoming the government again. Madam Speaker, I have some good friends in the Tory party. Maybe I have some big enemies too. I don't know. But I certainly want to congratulate them on becoming the government again. No. You just keep quiet and behave yourself. This is a day for you to listen. Madam Speaker, what we do know is that taking over government in any country, and certainly one as the UK, has to have its interpretations, has to have its feelings, whether you can make it or whether you will fail. Certainly they must be pleasing that they have come from a coalition to gain such a large number of seats. So those of us in this fraternity of parliamentary democracy can extend congratulations to them. Madam Speaker, most of all though, I want to express my pleasure in seeing that my friend and my lawyer, Mr. Jeffrey Cox, has retained his seat. Not only did he retain his seat, but won it by a huge margin in a field of several candidates. And so we want to congratulate him. I think a lot of Caymanians now know of him, of his prowess as a lawyer, his ability as a lawyer. Some probably will cringe at it, but nevertheless, he won by a huge margin. Madam Speaker, the presentation of a country's budget is important. So, Madam Speaker, it shouldn't be laced with personal attacks from the main person presenting the policy. And the need for self-preservation and aggrandizement often make hatred the kind of mine that made the speech go off the deep end. That is where the Premier found himself on Friday. Madam Speaker, the Premier began with Shakespeare and sad to say, ended, it seemed, with Satan. Sorry, Madam Speaker, but I don't think that was what Shakespeare had in mind when he talked about the tide in the affairs of man. The tide in our affairs, Madam Speaker, I want the Premier to know is running against us. And that is what must be addressed properly so that all of Cayman can benefit from our hard labor. That's not happening. It's not happening because of the mindset of the government. If they were different, the quality of the lives of our people would be greatly improved. Madam Speaker, I must say too that our people have to make up their mind on what it is they want and where these islands should be in the future. I have said many, many times, Madam Speaker, that Caymanians must embrace wealth or reap poverty. We cannot continue to listen to naysayers in the form when you are about to put forward meaningful policy that will address long-term issues in this country. No, Madam Speaker, whether it be immigration or whether it be development or otherwise, if you don't take the hard decisions, bad is going to be the end for these islands. You can't listen, Madam Speaker, to those persons who talk about they don't want to be too many people, and this one is responsible for taking business, and to put it bluntly, that this investor or that new Caymanian or that new person coming is responsible for taking business. But yet, at the same time, Madam Speaker, that same person complaining can walk away with a $25,000, $40,000 check from the business that those people have brought to our islands. And so, Madam Speaker, that's how we have built this country. We built it with open arms, but by protecting our own people, but allowing people to come and spend so that we could enhance ourselves, so that we could get a better standard of living, so that we didn't have to live when we stayed in our grandma houses, worry about the leaking roof and sleeping on a floor bed. No, we moved from that. But how did we do it? We must ask the question, did those persons who had the wherewithal in the country give us that opportunity? No, we didn't. And I keep saying so, and we may have made enemies for it. But the fact is, we couldn't get the college education we wanted. I couldn't be the lawyer I wanted to be. I couldn't be the teacher I wanted to be because there was no opportunity. And the few that had the dollars, it did not trickle down. So I am one that's not ever going to give up on the fact that people must come and help us build. We must welcome them. And so immigration must be a thoughtful, very thought and deep thought process where people are not victimized. So the government had better put on their thinking cap. Madam Speaker, the development plans that I put on the table when I was the government, I knew would have benefited everyone had not the power or the desire of power and the ability to disrupt taken preeminence in the tide of affairs that was in existence, that was flowing between 2009 2012 by the then leader of the opposition, now premier. The fiscal discipline we exercised between 2009 and 2012 was remarkable, bearing in mind that in the first 2 years of the administration, the government incurred debt for the continued building of the Clifton Hunter High School and the John Gray High School, which was started by the PPM administration of 2005-2009. The Clifton Hunter School cost over $106 million to construct, equip, and furnish, while the John Gray School, which is incomplete, I don't know how much that has already cost this country, but it's in the millions and millions of dollars. Madam Speaker, the way in which the last PPM government went about trying to financing the two high schools is a lesson in how not to conduct fiscal affairs, including the procurement process and tendering of projects of government. The Premier would want people today of these islands to believe that it was my administration who participated in bad procurement practices. But what procurement? You know, gotten when the project started, he couldn't get to that point because of sabotage from the highest positions. The only problem with his statements is that they are not made on the basis of fact, but rather full resting on a figment of an overactive imagination. He stated, and I quote, "Bad procurement practices delayed needed projects and in some cases cost the country millions of dollars. I will assure the people of this country that we are not going back to those evil days." End of quote. Let me pause to allow the Premier, I hope he's listening, to carefully consider these statements. You know, the Premier can't sit down when I rise. He got to find an excuse to get out of this chamber. And always he can color it and say it was good, that he had to be out for some good reason. So, Madam Speaker, he continues, even in the highest of our days, on budget day, state opening day, to point his finger and lay blame on McKeever Bush. I was in a service a few Sundays ago, and the pastor said that there were two boys in the town whom everything in the world was blamed for. If a cat went up the tree, they got blamed for it. If some water was left on, they got blamed for it. Whatever happened in the town, no matter how mundane, no matter how large, it was those two boys' fault. So the boys went to Sunday school, and the pastor, who was a huge man, some 6 foot, 300 pounds, huge, grabbed one of the little boys and said, "Tell me, where is Jesus?" And with every question, the decibels rose that much higher. The little boy, petrified, frightened to death, finally wriggled himself away and ran home. And his brother went after him, looking all over the house for him, and say, when he found him locked up in the closet, said, "Boy, what happened to you? What happened to you?" Say, "What happened to me? Were you in church? Don't you hear that Jesus is missing and they can blame me and you?" Someone said to me after the service, "Mr. Bush, don't take it literally, but it sounds like that's the licks you've been taking." And so as I listened Friday, it came back to me. Oh, if they could leave it that way, they would let the world believe that I was wrong for every wrong, or I'm to blame for every wrong in this country. I believe if anybody has taken leave of his senses, it must be him. Do I need to remind the Premier of the gross mismanagement of the procurement process with Tom Jones and the building of the schools? Do I need him to remind him that Tom Jones walked off the job countless times for various breaches of contract? Do I need to remind the Premier that this country spent over 100% more than what was agreed to complete Clifton Hunter High School? And when it is all said and done, a similar situation would have occurred with the John Gray High School. Do I need to remind him? Do I need to remind him of the big row that him and Tom Jones people had, which was carried on the front page of the Cayman Compass? Do I need to remind the Premier of the millions of dollars of fill that was dumped in West Bay, Georgetown, and Bordentown on sites where capital works projects were to begin, but due to the gross negligence and lack of controls, and with no money, millions of dollars of fill still remain on those sites, but the projects never got started. Bad procurement, bad process. Madam Speaker, just in West Bay for the Beulah Smith High School, $2.5 million in mal and $900,000 to the contractor for having to stop the work. And they point their fingers at me, saying that I caused, and what did the finance minister say? Frittered away millions of dollars. But they can only look at a few ways I frittered away. I'll come to that. I'll come to it. I will. Oh, patient, my son. Patient. You get it. You get it because I know you all can refer to it. That was only a tease on Friday. Mr. Premier, it is you who should be mindful of the abuses of procurement processes conducted during that administration. Part of the process, Madam Speaker, of good procurement is to see that the necessary funds are available to do what's being agreed to by the Central Tenders Committee. If the funds are not available, but the projects approved, then is the Central Tenders doing their job? Are they doing their job? Is it not a fact also that Tom Jones and the Cayman Islands government got into a lawsuit? The bad deals and flimsy contracts government entered into, while it was my UDP government that had to deal with the headaches, it was the PPM government that placed this country in the financial mess in 2009. So flimsy were these contracts and the poor quality of work that my UDP government was forced to search out a better alternative. Madam Speaker, windows and entire floors had to be chopped out and jackhammered up in order to build a safe and code-compliant building. You think that didn't cost money? You should have went and seen it. You should have went and seen the mess for people who say they were contractors. I don't know who they were. I don't know none of them, but I can tell you that it was a mess and it cost money. Money. How about the $12 million that was paid to Tom Jones without proper procurement? Because there was no real procurement. If there was, they couldn't go into it because there was not the money to do it all. And there was concern which was brought out in finance committees in the records wanting to know what and how the $12 million was spent. The PPM broke all of the financial ratios that are a part of the public management and finance law. Wasn't it the PPM administration that spent almost $1 million? No, more than $1 million. Over $2 million, I think it was, to put on a boxing fight. And our Cayman boxer was never given an opportunity to fight live for the world to see. Now they want to play games about millions of dollars being frittered away by me. Yes, it was. That's what they want to say. I tried to get something done. Yes. So they can say, oh, the Chinese, you had to pay them? Yes. They left the Chinese, don't even have a dock. Count how much times the money was spent, Mr. Minister of Finance. You gave people scholarships and you shouldn't have gave one about the other and nation building was bad. Well, what is it? How wrong is it, Madam Speaker, that if a family is better off than the next family, that you shouldn't help the less well-off family a little bit more? Why not? And make I tell you all, I know you looked, they investigated, I know they did, but they couldn't find, because you know what? McKeever treats everybody equal. PPM, C for C, UDP, any person, whether they come from whatever family they come from, I don't care. I don't care about that. If they come from the man in the moon, if they deserve to be helped, that's my modus operandi. But they say that was bad. You can't manage. And you didn't go to university. You don't have no education. I heard all those things right there sitting there. The insults that kept coming. And don't ask about the campaign. Oh my God. I've never in all my years been through one that so many things were said. So, Madam Speaker, money being frittered away, Mr. Minister of Finance. We're talking about what? What about it?
Please put comments to the chair.
Madam Speaker, if he got a question, let that man rise so I can answer him properly. Let him rise if he is a man. Let him rise. No, they prefer to do what they just done. And they're stinking, dirty, evil talk. But facts are facts. And I know when they're getting licked, when they stoop to the lies. Because when I use my money, it's mine. No matter what I do with it, it's mine. I did mine. Don't worry about that. No, you don't know. You shouldn't shake your head because you don't know. You wasn't there. You only listen to a liar who was paid by you all to lie. That's what I want to tell you. But take up your time doing that instead of answering the things that you need to answer. Take up your time doing that. See if that can get you anywhere. It might put you a little bit further behind than you think you are. Madam Speaker, they broke all the financial ratios that are part of the public management and finance law. Now they play the blame game about millions of dollars being frittered away by me. Madam Speaker, they like to point fingers, but they better remind themselves that 5, 4 could be pointing back at themselves. Madam Speaker, the lack of planning by the PPM government of the past is indicative of how small, vulnerable countries can find themselves overnight almost paralyzed by self-induced stroke. Fortunately for us, we could manage the symptoms found in 2009 once the appropriate diagnosis revealed the facts, and my UDP-led government acted as swiftly as we could in this bureaucratic environment. The potential paralysis, Madam Speaker, from the swelling debt in the Caymanian economy as a result of the reckless fritting away of the country's surplus and reckless borrowing and fearless abandonment of prudent fiscal practices by the last PPM administration was enough to encourage the UDP government to find a more viable approach to investing both domestically and internationally. In June of 2011, Madam Speaker, I announced the contents of the investment alliance with DART, Cayman Islands, known as the For Cayman Investment Alliance. At that time, I stated boldly, as is my nature, that investment around the world has been uncertain. As a result, my government would not plan to engage in any further long-term borrowing, even for needed projects, including schools and roads. Investors the world over were and still are exercising a high level of caution, waiting and watching before committing to huge, large-scale projects. Therefore, the need for partnerships with the private sector to build national infrastructure, facilities, and social and educational programs without incurring any debt or obligation to repay in some instances was an essential part of my government's economic growth strategy. This approach was far superior to that which the PPM government pursued prior to 2009 and remains far superior to what they are even now pursuing. Their criticism, Madam Speaker, for what my government did between 2009 and 2012 was so relentless and so ruthless that they find it very difficult to move in any direction that will be seen as walking in that path laid before by my UDP government. I know that the politically aware, regardless of what party they support or who they support, can see that the machinations, Madam Speaker, of the PPM is nothing more than trying to claim original UDP ideas as their own. What did you have? Where are yours? Even the word that they said was even the word UDP. Even the words United Democratic Party, UDP, they said meant under that power. Oh my. And look where you are today. The same thing they done with some of the businesses before. Unless it is them, it is no good. Only them. They're the masters. They have it all. They know it all. Only them. Oh yeah? I don't think so. So, Madam Speaker, the next time the Premier gets up to speak, he should be mindful that they are here today sailing a ship that the UDP government had to command after they ran her aground. Also be mindful that the PPM have not done anything other than carry out the fine work which the UDP government started. And because I know just how much joy they have in their hearts for me and how discombobulated and forgetful they can become when they become overly excited. Let me name a few of the plans, Madam Speaker. The Narayana Cayman University Medical Center, that is the UDP medical tourism policy. And its various ancillary businesses such as information technology development, the cargo dock to do specialized transshipment and an oil refinery, a new cruise ship berthing facility, various proposals for renewable energy, the Ironwood project, this was a Gulf community development project in north side of East End, and the necessary east-west arterial road to go with it, a new five-star hotel in the Bordentown area, that projects for Cayman Investment Alliance, that is roads and waste management program and agreement with new hotels and other commercial property development. Cayman Enterprise City, redevelopment for a cruise ship jetty at the Cayman Turtle Farm to make it easier for tourists to visit the attraction and for new tourism attractions to be added so that it can pay its way. Numerous partnerships with the private sector for the building of condos and commercial development that would keep the construction industry buoyant. This was further stimulated by providing reductions in import duty of construction material. New gateways for CAL and other airlines to increase our tourism. A mega yacht development to create a new maritime industry. The airport redevelopment plan, including jetways and runway extension. In my various discussion with Cayman's tourism officials and overseas business people in the industry, including a discussion with Mr. Branson, who told me on his visit here, and in my discussions with him about Virgin Airlines coming to Cayman, that there would be an increase there should be an increase in our room stock and the expansion of the airport, which included the expansion of the runway. Also in my discussion with BA regarding the change in the use of the 767 to the 777s, they agreed to bringing the 777s, but one of the conditions attached was that we needed to have a better airport facility. However, Madam Speaker, after the government has had to accept the projects, let me say to the Premier, history cannot be successfully thwarted, and facts will always rise above the distraction and evil of those who believe they can repeat the distraction of a plan or an issue. They shall not succeed. But, Madam Speaker, such was the blatant attacks on our medical tourism plans, and even attacking Dr. Shatter himself, the port plans, and Cayman Enterprise City, and the revenue measures, all of which the now Premier gave no quarter in his attacks on me between 2009 and 2012. None. But today, the PPM have seen the light. The good common sense are used, and lo and behold, what wonderful projects they are today. What wonderful projects they are. Madam Speaker, isn't it fair and fitting to say, he who knows not and knows not that he knows not is a fool, shun him. He who knows not and knows that he knows not is ignorant, teach him. He who knows and knows that he knows is a wise man, follow him. He who knows and knows not that he knows is asleep, wake him. As for Cayman Enterprise City, I'm also glad to see that the Premier has finally come around to seeing the benefits of this project as well. The fact is that the numbers CEC promise, Cayman Economic City promise, were based on projections seen in other parts of the world. Those figures could have grown at a much greater rate if it wasn't for the bureaucracy placed in its way by opposition spouting off on various civil servants who sided with the opposition. The fact of the matter is, if I had listened to the PPM opposition, the special economic zone, just like the Shetty project, would have never gotten off the ground. The fact is that it takes time for any new sector to take root, flourish, and grow. I never forget in the cabinet that day when Duncan Taylor told me when I carried the Shetty project to cabinet that he was voting against it. I said, where you have a vote in this cabinet? You ain't got no vote here. If you object to this, go to London and tell them why. And his reply was, well, I won't go that far. I said, no, you can't, because it is a good project. But they've done everything in the world, Madam Speaker. I don't need to remind you, Madam Speaker, because you are going to speak to here, only because you're the Speaker. But you were there. You know? I am very proud of the efforts by the UDP administration made in the face of unyielding opposition by the PPM. I'm also very satisfied with the progress that Charlie Kirkernel and Cinda O'Hara have made. I still support the project wholeheartedly. They are two good Caymanians coming from strong family business backgrounds. And I believe they will make it. I see that. I have not seen what was renegotiated recently, but will say this. My government, Madam Speaker, had to ensure that this new sector was not going to grow at the expense of sacrificing the great gains made in our economy, particularly in the financial services industry. It was always envisioned that CEC would be a new industry, standing on its own and working in tandem with the financial services industry. It was going to bring a new kind of business, Madam Speaker, one where businesses would have a physical presence here and not just have a registered office. It was, Madam Speaker, on that basis that we insisted that businesses servicing the local industry would not be allowed to operate inside the zone as a zone company and be entitled to any of the concessions. You see, Madam Speaker, if we allowed all local businesses to enter the zone and receive the benefits from the special economic zone concessions, we will end up seriously destroying our revenue base. I hope they see that. However, Madam Speaker, we agreed that we would allow specific local businesses like law firms and accounting firms to have a presence in the zone, as we believe that their presence in the zone would complement the efforts of CEC. However, they would not be treated as zone companies and would not be entitled to any special economic zone benefits. Madam Speaker, it is not true and grossly misleading for the Premier to state that the legal agreement by my UDP government signed did not give Caymanian businesses access to the various market segments contained in the agreement. We spoke with various Caymanian businesses, including law firms, discussing a multitude of opportunities, including the introduction of a comprehensive trademarks, patent, and copyright law, making it easier for tech businesses and intellectual property companies to register, protect, and transfer intellectual property efficiently in and out of the Cayman Islands. We spoke with SEMA and the Cayman Islands Stock Exchange and Maples about what it would take to establish a derivative and commodities park, but the wheels of bureaucracy, Madam Speaker, sometimes move mightily slow. However, I can assure that we had advanced talks about assisting CEC in getting this commodities park. I still believe that this commodities park is essential and very necessary to move our financial services in a new direction. In addition, Madam Speaker, the design plans for Cayman Economic City has also centered on creating a cluster where businesses benefit from a working environment in close proximity of other businesses of a similar nature. To that end, Madam Speaker, it was also necessary to have other businesses in the zone to offer complementary and ancillary services. So restaurants, fitness centers, and other businesses have always been encouraged and welcomed into the zone. This will allow these businesses to have a sure and certain clientele. They are guaranteed a certain amount of business just by being located in the zone, or they should be. However, they would not have been allowed to receive the concessions as a zone company because they fall outside the agreed zone businesses located in one of the parks, namely media, biotech, commodities, IT, outsource, and now the maritime. It's a position, Madam Speaker, I supported then, and it's a position I still support now. So if the Premier has been able to modify the agreement and still safeguard the financial services industry and the overall local economy and government's revenue base, then I say congratulations. After all, Madam Speaker, this is what progress is all about, working together for the greater good. But for the avoidance of doubt and to again make sure history isn't distorted by fiction, let me record in straight terms, what I did to create the special economic zone and facilitate Cayman Enterprise City. In February 2011, government signed an MOU with a development group regarding the desire to establish a knowledge-based special economic zone in the Cayman Islands, which would be the first of its kind in the Caribbean region. The objective was to diversify the economy and bring new knowledge-based companies that would not have considered establishing Cayman prior to the launch of the zone. In September 2011, the Special Economic Zones Law was enacted, and in February 2012, the Special Economic Zones Authority was established and Cayman Enterprise City launched. Since then, CEC has brought over 153 companies to set up a physical presence in the Cayman Islands with staffed offices. Almost half of these companies were in the zone when during the early stages. The majority of these companies have moved from North America, both the US and Canada, as we predicted. CEC, Madam Speaker, it's acquired property now. They're going to build. And they have created an internship program encouraging encouraging zone companies to take on young Caymanian interns. Last year, 10 students interned within the zone. This year, CEC expects to increase that number by 50% this year, as we predicted it would do, and as we promised by my government, it had the ability to do. And so CEC has launched their website with the objective of becoming a resource for young Caymanians, as well as linking to the jobs portal and the internship program. It provides information, articles, tips, and videos on entrepreneurship and technology. And they have created the Maritime Services Park within CEC. But I should say, Madam Speaker, if there was no CEC, which we know I received opposition to, then would there be a maritime park being proposed as the latest addition to the park? No, I don't think so. So again, I say big kudos to CEC for making good on their promise to my government when we signed the agreement, to doing its part in diversifying the economy and contributing to our gross domestic product. And, Madam Speaker, in terms of what we did to raise revenue as an alternative to imposing some form of direct taxation, we had to increase fees, Madam Speaker. The PPM government has continued to go along on this trajectory and has not reduced any of those fees, save the fuel surcharge, which I want to make the record clear about. Madam Speaker, the Premier talked about duty surcharge on fuel being reduced while blaming me for its increase. We all know, Madam Speaker, why that had to be done. We know that it was the PPM who created the deficit. However, I promised that when our financial position was better, we would reduce that duty that we had to put on. They wouldn't do so, and I brought a motion to have it reduced significantly. Well, the budget came, and they said they were taking some off. They wouldn't accept the last motion, claiming all the country could afford was what they were offering. Now, not even 9 months later, they have come back and taken it all off, they say. So, at the time of my motion, the surplus projections were already waiting. So what does it mean? It means that the allegations he made on the UDP government about living in the past and self-aggrandizement and political survival got to be what they are practicing at the expense of the poor people, when they could have done much better from the beginning, because we created the surplus, which must be able to help some of our people. That's a fact. You can't change that. But they want to change it, and they'll get up. I was going to say everyone, but let's wait and see who's going to be parroting after the Premier. We wait, because they all would never come in front and speak. You got to speak in the back of when I speak. Madam Speaker, the alternative, let me say again, to not introducing those fees would have been the imposing of some form of direct taxation, which the Labour government wanted me to do. They wanted me to put in place property tax, income tax, payroll tax, or VAT. I also recall how the now Premier and his then PPM colleagues carried on when these increases were announced. In his estimation, the sky was falling. Yet today, at this very minute, the Minister of Finance has declared for the third year in a row that there are no changes to the budget in terms of increases in duties. So I see that the sky hasn't fallen. And as a matter of fact, Premier, you and your government are quite happy to bask in the sun of these glorious moments. You can say something for as long as you want, and say it as loud as you want, and even believe your own statements, but you will never be able to turn an untruth into the truth. You should really check what you're saying. Madam Speaker, as long as the Premier continues to speak evil and distorts history and the facts, I will offer corrective information. Simply put, Madam Speaker, the Premier's comments, his claims, his innuendo has nothing but pure propaganda that leads the country to its own demise. His talk was what hurt the people 2009, 2012. And people are still hurting today from that ricochet. Someone said, Madam Speaker, the most, and I quote, the most effective way to destroy people is to deny and obliterate their own understanding of their history. End of quote. So, for as long as this PPM-led administration tries to bend history in their favor, I will stand opposed and speak the truth until the truth is forever embedded in the minds of the people of these islands. The truth is that it was the PPM administration between 2005, 2009, which was severely reckless and grossly mismanaged the finances of these islands. As a responsible opposition at the time, I came to the floor of this honorable House on numerous occasions to warn them of their wanton spending, and they responded by telling me, and I quote, "Not on the kindest of mornings, McKeever Bush, would you be listen to my sound advice." The result of that was that the first time in its history, the Cayman Islands brought a deficit budget to this House. We became non-compliant with the public management and finance law. They broke the law. And the Cayman Islands had to go cap in hand to the Foreign Office in the UK to get every budget, including this budget, which we are now debating, is approved by the FCO. The new loan bill for the PPM was well over 300 million, just covering a few areas. But they racked up a total loan bill well into $500 million by mid-2009 or thereafter. They had agreed to the new loan. They had agreed, Madam Speaker, to the new loan with Morgan Stanley, I think for about 7.5%. I have that agreement somewhere about, Madam Speaker. They broke the PMFL, and that is what allowed the United Kingdom a hold over our budget since 2009. All the United Kingdom government had to do in the past years was to give assent to our appropriation bill. They never had no say in the budget. All they had was a say in signing the appropriation bill, the assent. My government, when we took office in 2009, had to dig the country out of a financial black hole by introducing new duties and increasing taxes in other areas. I made a promise to the people of the Cayman Islands that when the country could afford it, Madam Speaker, I would repeal certain taxes or fees, including the duty on fuel. I also went all over the world trying to bring business to these shores, and also through the sale of a bond, which took much time because we were in the throes of getting off of the OECD gray list, which was, who was then the Minister for Financial Affairs? Who? The Premier, the now Premier, then the Minister. That's who put us. Was responsible for having placed us on that list because he chose to ignore an international obligation to have us sign tax exchange information agreements. And through the issuance of the bond, we were able to refinance much of our short-term debt. The alternative would have been much worse, and my government was being forced by the FCO to impose some form of direct taxation on the people of the Cayman Islands, which would have had eternal negative implications to our financial services industry. Income, Madam Speaker, income tax, property tax, value-added tax would have increased the burden on the poor, the elderly, and the working middle class. This, Madam Speaker, is what the PPM administration should claim total responsibility for. And to add insult to injury, they have the audacity to say that building a $100 million school or a $106 million school was in the best interest of our children's future. The now Premier, who was then Minister for Education, was advised that the country would encounter huge financial costs and our economy would not and could not sustain this level of capital expenditure. But to that solid advice, he told the entire country that he was proceeding, and I quote, only God could stop him. Did he really need to spend $106 million on a building designed in Chicago for the climate of Chicago when we could have gotten a more appropriate building for half that or maybe less? So, Mr. Premier, take credit for that. Take credit in knowing that you and members of your cabinet are the only and absolute perpetrators of this abominable and financial treacherous act. That's what it is. In your pride, arrogance, you drove our islands to the brink of financial collapse. Now you want McKeever to take the blame for it. Take credit for that. That's a part of history that can never, ever be erased. Yet you have the nerve to talk about my government being the cause for people losing confidence in the Cayman economy. It was my administration, our hard work and persistence that kept these islands afloat. Madam Speaker, they said, how many times they called me fool? I am uneducated, didn't have no university education, shouldn't be Minister of Finance. But it was my efforts that allowed our islands to maintain our Moody's AA3 rating, credit rating, during the worst financial crisis the world has ever seen. Yes, I had civil servants who helped me. Yes. Even while the US and the UK were both downgraded and nations around us were faltering and further afield were faltering. Cayman Islands, while the US and the UK were both downgraded, the Cayman Islands maintains its credit rating. And if it wasn't for the UDP saving the Cayman economy, your PPM-led government would be leading an island in the aftermath of an economic meltdown. What do they want to say? They want to draw red herring, come talk, try to want to lay something personal at my people, let them go ahead. So I got a few personal things in a basket waiting for them. I want to see who's Little White. You remember what I said? That last time I saw Little White, didn't look like someone. So go ahead with on the personalities. Think, yeah, highly paid liar will say one. Wait and see, Madam Speaker, wait and see. I wonder, Madam Speaker, if they would have wanted to take charge, if we hadn't done the things to help the country. I wonder what we would have had if we had listened to the mock parliament held outside here and they're talking about political shenanigans. Madam Speaker, let me go to this continued frame of mind about competence, intelligence, and relations. After destroying the surplus that we had left, and they found in May 2005, they left the deficit of 80 million total in 2009, thereabouts. They left huge unpaid bills. And there was a government building started with no money to build it. It ended up costing just about $100 million. We didn't cut the 500 to 600 civil servants as the FCO wanted. And don't say they didn't want that, Madam Speaker. They told us so. We must go and do so. I say, where in the world do I have the power to do that? Oh, the Constitution. The Constitution is your baby. You want it, Mr. Governor, you go do so. Not me, I don't have that responsibility. I can't do that. But they wanted it. Nor did we cut the senior citizens, veterans, and scholarship grants that they wanted us to do. We didn't do so. So now the PPM says they should get the political credit for the surplus. But let me give the PPM credit for balancing the budget on the backs of the poor people of these islands. They have totally ignored the needs of the poor, the elderly, and the handicapped, except what is normally budgeted with a little increase every year, but not the huge fallout from the crisis that we have been in. They haven't taken up anywhere near as much slack as they could. But as politics go, Madam Speaker, the people are aware of what the Premier did between 2005 and 2009. No matter what the budget looks like today, he can't take the credit because nothing new has been done to earn revenue. It was the PPM who left us in the hands of the UK, not the UDP. It was the PPM who gave us a surplus. It wasn't the PPM who gave us that. It was the UDP. The people know. They are more aware than how certain sections of the media may put it or what the PPM is now trying to portray. So, Madam Speaker, yes, I can heave a sigh of relief that what the PPM did in breaking the law is now being corrected. Corrected because we in the UDP had to put in place new revenue measures which has gotten us to this point. So the people have had to pay for the mistakes made by the PPM by paying higher fees to bring us back from financial ruin and regain our financial independence. This is a burden that we have all had to bear, political friend and foe, resident and citizen alike. What I know is, Madam Speaker, that while there was the surplus, children's scholarships were cut. Benefits to the handicapped people were cut. And senior citizens, in particular, the seamen and others in need, were not assisted. Many still applications lying around, not assisted. Maybe, Madam Speaker, those on the high horse who somehow believe that they are more and above some of us and think that they can look down on us, they will laud these decisions not to give and laud it as good fiscal management. But certainly in my thinking, Madam Speaker, it's a loss of our social conscience and the moral responsibility of the government. Yes, I heave a sigh of relief and say thanks to the government because the fiscal plan we put to the FCO and agreed by them in 2012 has kept its course, except for the areas which the PPM tweaked. It's the surplus that we put in place that has kept us on this successful trajectory. Sad to say, meanwhile, people have no work, no electricity, including the handicaps, no water, and losing their houses. The elected government, Madam Speaker, yes, we are winning the battle because we are meeting the FCO requirements. We are winning the battle, Madam Speaker, but Caymanians are losing the war. Caymanians are losing the war. The economy is still in the doldrums, and Madam Speaker, we should take heed regarding the pronouncements made by top economists, economic analysis or analysts who suggest that the world economy is still very fragile and could find itself in another recession. What is the government of these islands doing to mitigate and protect us from the full force and effect of another world economic crisis? Build back confidence, they say. Oh yes, with what they are doing, an immigration program that is stifling businesses, both local and foreign, and one that is keeping Caymanians from getting work. It is an immigration policy that is heavily discriminatory, and it cannot build a country for the future. Madam Speaker, I listen to some people talk about too many people in this country. We cannot build a robust future if we don't have critical mass to achieve economies of scale. That said, Madam Speaker, I'm fully aware that we also cannot grow our population at a rate exceeding GDP. We know that. However, Madam Speaker, growth in GDP means more demands for goods and services. We can only get that kind of consistent and protracted growth if we have a population that can sustain the needed demand through its numbers and also earn a decent wage with an increase in their disposable income. This formula can contribute to the growth of the economy through spending. Simply put, Madam Speaker, a growing population and decent wages will equal new and sustain gross domestic growth and a strong local economy. However, if we try to stifle growth and opportunity and rely on cheap labor and practice exploitation and discrimination, the Caymanian economy will suffer and businesses will close. Madam Speaker, that's a fact. Let all those who say we don't need this, we don't need that, let them say how their entrepreneurship is going to work. Let them say it. I say it many times, and people don't seem to like it and don't want to admit it. They'll cuss me for it. But when you fire one manager, 3 Caymanian secretaries mostly sometimes are lost.
Honorable Leader of the Opposition, you have 1 hour remaining. At this time, I'll take a 10-minute morning break.
Madam Speaker, I might need some of the help from my colleagues that they won't be speaking for all their time.
I'll have the leader to your negotiation skills, Leader of Opposition.
Thank you kindly.